We are Maria
and Nicole. We're two secular homeschooling moms that have
been there, done that. Our mission at BTDT has always been to support and empower the homeschool community. And we had a completely different episode planned for today, but with everything happening right now, we really knew that we couldn't stay silent and decided to pivot. Today, we're talking about the dismantling of public education and the threat of school vouchers. This issue isn't just about public schools. It affects all of us, including homeschoolers. We're not immune to the consequences of these policies that are being pushed on us.
Right. It's easy to assume that because we homeschool, we're unaffected by what's happening in the public education realm. But that couldn't be further from the truth. The push for school vouchers isn't about expanding choices for families. It's about diverting critical funding from public schools. This will lead to a weakening of an institution that serves millions of children, and it sets a dangerous precedent that could undermine educational freedom for all of us. This isn't just a public school issue. It's an issue that impacts our entire society, and we can't afford to ignore it.
No, we can't. And we know that everyone is feeling overwhelmed right now. We're being bombarded daily with sensational news from the administration. We're all feeling like this. It's frustrating, and sometimes we just need to step away for a mental health moment. And it's really tempting to tune it all out because it seems too big of a fight. But history has shown us something really important. When people stand together, we create change. Unjust policies have been overturned, civil rights have been expanded, democracy has been defended, not because people stayed silent, but because they spoke up and took action.
We're not alone in this. You're not alone in this. Across the country, people are pushing back, protesting, and holding leaders accountable. Change is still possible, but first we need to understand what's really at stake. So let's talk about it. Let's break it down. Let's get clear on the facts and figure out what we can do together. Because this isn't just about schools. This is about the future of education for all of our kids.
Yeah, and we all see it. We're witnessing a deliberate and reckless dismantling of critical institutions under this administration. And these policies are being pushed without thought for the millions of people that they're going to harm.
Exactly. Like federal employees are facing massive layoffs, many of which are lifelong civil servants and veterans. My dad was a federal employee for 40 years. Seniors are now facing threats to Social Security and Medicare, and these are programs they've spent their entire lives paying into.
Yeah, the LGBTQ plus community is under direct attack through regressive policies that strip away their rights, and minorities are experiencing unprecedented levels of discrimination.
Women's reproductive rights and access to essential health care is being systematically dismantled. The government even flagged the word woman in their system, and that further erases our voices and identities. These rollbacks will have devastating consequences for future generations, especially our daughters who are growing up in a country where their rights are being stripped away by leaders who have consistently devalued women.
Workers are being left to the mercy of corporations with no protections, fair wages, and no recourse against exploitation.
And how about climate? This one's going to affect us all. They're cutting environmental regulations while ignoring the worsening climate crisis.
And with everything going on, I feel like this might be most dangerous of them all, is that the government is actively shaping what we see, all the information we see and all the information we hear. Media outlets are being sued, they're being intimidated and replaced with alt-right propaganda and conspiracy theories as legitimate news sources. Meta is limiting our news feed, and TikTok's algorithm has completely changed since the whole 18-hour down.
I know. Remember last week when we were concerned with China stealing our information?
Right, exactly.
How about trade wars? We are picking fights with some of our strongest global partners. And I mean, you have to be really, really bad to piss off Canadians. Jeez.
It's true.
Yeah. Trade wars and deteriorating relationships with allies should be like a huge concern.
Yeah, and thousands of immigrants are being detained. They're raiding elementary schools and churches. Women, men, children, they're all being put in facilities with no oversight and no accountability for human rights abuses. And these aren't just deportation centers. They're concentration camps. Let's call them what they are. Yeah. People are being warehoused in places like Guantanamo Bay, El Salvador. All of these places, they have no path forward. We are both children of immigrants. Yeah. My parents fled from Cuba as refugees minorities. So this is especially personal for us.
Totally. Diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives are being gutted across the board. And the push to destroy DEI efforts in education, workplaces, government institutions, this is all part of a larger agenda to erase protections for marginalized groups. This administration has turned DEI into this boogeyman, when in reality it was a very basic step towards leveling the playing field. Now schools, universities, corporations are being forced to abandon equity efforts that help underrepresented communities and return to systems that favor the privileged. And not to mention, DEI initiatives mean a whole host of other things: accessibility for the handicapped, parental leave, subtitles on TV, like changing tables in restrooms, size-inclusive medical equipment. Like, do people not understand what these words mean?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like they don't. I saw a meme about how making it into an acronym transforms it into a thought-terminating cliche, and I thought that was brilliant. Like, we need to be asking people out loud, like, which of these words is it that you don't like? You oppose diversity? Say it.
Yeah. And while all of this is happening, we have Elon Musk, a Nazi billionaire who thinks politics is a joke. He's an immigrant himself with unchecked access to our government and treats our democracy like a game.
Yeah, a literal Nazi. And at the center of all this, education. There's a complete attack on education. There's clearly a lot of things that we need to tackle,
Yes.
but today we're going to really stay focused on this particular topic. At the federal level, they're trying to eliminate the Department of Education, completely defunding and deregulating education across the country.
Yeah, and here in Texas and in several other states, they're pushing school vouchers, which is a system designed to defund and destroy public schools while funneling taxpayer money into private institutions. And these people are getting richer while they dismantle everything that keeps our country functioning and running.
Right. And I know we have listeners from all over, but we've both done a lot of deep dives into the Texas school choice bill as it affects us personally. So we're going to talk specifically about this one, knowing that the ramifications of bills like this are pretty universal.
Yeah. So the Texas school choice bill, often framed as an opportunity for parents to take control of their children's education, it's really a wolf in sheep's clothing. Supporters claim that it empowers families by providing vouchers or education savings accounts, or ESAs, that allow public funds to be used for private or charter schools. They sell it as a money following the student. But on the surface, that might sound like a really great idea, but I assure you it is a total scam. A deeper look reveals that this policy would weaken public education and create greater inequalities. In the long run, this would really harm Texas families.
Right. This bill has been marketed aggressively as a school choice bill, but you know what? We already have school choice in Texas.
We do.
Yep, you can choose public, private, or you can choose to homeschool like we did. And choosing to homeschool like we did does not mean that we don't support public schools. I still support public schools. Everyone benefits from an educated society.
We do.
Every child deserves a right to free, quality education. We just don't expect to be paid for our choices. We're lucky to be able to opt out of the system. My personal hope was that that would leave funding for other kids who don't have the same opportunities.
Right. Some people grumble when it's tax season, when it's time to pay your property taxes into the school system. I don't, because I know there's children that really desperately need this.
Absolutely.
And as homeschoolers in Texas, we already have it really good. We are a non-reporting state, which means that we have relatively few requirements and no accountability to the government. And this is not free money. It will come with strings attached. This just opens the door wide open for future regulation to your homeschool.
Exactly. I don't even know any homeschoolers that are for this. Like, it baffles me that they've estimated in this bill that 50% of homeschoolers would apply to participate in the first year to get the $2,000 ESA amount they've designated for us. 50%. And then they further estimate that there's 560,000 homeschoolers in Texas.
They have no idea how many homeschoolers
Where are they
Texas.
even getting this number?
They don't know.
It's a made-up figure. We've talked about this before in other episodes. Maybe they base it on school withdrawals. I don't know, but that still would not be an accurate number. My kids have never been to school. We're completely off-grid.
Totally off grid. So aside from our personal feelings, let's talk about the facts. So why are vouchers a scam?
Well, number one, it's all about defunding public schools. Texas already struggles with underfunded public schools, especially in rural areas where school districts serve as both educational institutions and community centers. Texas consistently spends less per student than the national average. According to NEA, they spent $6,160. That's just a basic allotment per student last year. And this allotment has not been raised since 2019, by the way. And we are in the bottom 10 states for funding.
The proposed voucher bill promises $10,000 to private schoolers, but only $6,500 to public schools.
Oh, at least they're raising that 2019 figure, $400.
Pathetic. The school choice bill diverts public taxpayer dollars to private institutions, leaving already struggling schools with fewer resources, larger class sizes, and lower quality education. Instead of fixing the problems in public schools, this bill will absolutely exacerbate them.
Right. And Texas public schools rely on state funding based on student enrollment. When students leave for a private or charter school under a voucher system, those public schools are going to receive even less funding. But they're still required and expected to maintain operations and pay teachers and support those remaining students. This is going to lead to budget shortfalls, staff reductions, and fewer resources for students who remain in the public system.
So also, unlike public schools, private institutions receiving voucher funds are not held to the same academic and financial accountability standards. They can set their own admission policies, their curriculum standards, and their disciplinary rules, and often this happens without transparency. This means that public money could be used to fund schools that don't even meet the same rigorous educational benchmarks that public schools must follow.
Right.
And they get more money.
Yeah, teachers don't even need to be certified.
Correct.
There's no recourse. And many private schools in Texas also have a religious focus. I deeply oppose my public tax dollars going to fund religious education. We're secular homeschoolers. And don't even get me started on why churches should be taxed. That's a whole other episode.
Right. Public schools in Texas are subject to rigorous state oversight, standardized testing, and financial transparency requirements. Private schools and charter institutions receiving public funds through school choice programs don't have to adhere to the same standards. And this lack of accountability allows for a host of problems: discrimination against students based on religion, race, identity, disability, or even economic background. They can refuse whoever they want.
Exactly. And who owns these private schools?
Well, let's get on that one.
I know. So Houston Independent School District Superintendent Mike Miles was hired in 2023. Have you heard of this guy? He's had a drama-filled tenure where he has changed libraries into discipline centers, and 10,000 staff members have quit, since he has
Insane.
been there. Just nuts. He's the founder of a group of charter schools in another state, and including some that are here operating in Texas. And he was accused of actually funneling money through them. I think TEA supposedly found no evidence of wrongdoing, but come on.
Conflict of interest much?
Right?
Follow the money.
Follow the money. So, while supporters argue that school choice benefits all students, in reality, it disproportionately helps wealthy families and or families that are already paying for private school.
Yes. Many private schools charge tuition that far exceeds that $10,000 that is going to be provided by the vouchers, making them inaccessible to lower income families. Additionally, while public schools have to take all students, like I said earlier, private schools can pick whoever they want. They're not required to accommodate any student with a disability or a special need, and may lack the specialized resources available in public schools. And this effectively shuts out some of the most vulnerable of our children from educational opportunities. And this is absolutely what we do not want.
Right. And do you think they aren't going to just raise private school prices to accommodate a voucher? It's essentially a coupon.
Right.
So school choice bills also disproportionately benefit families who already have the means to navigate complex application processes and provide transportation. Do you think a kid who is in a toxic family situation who already has issues with parents that don't care about their education is going to have a parent who's going to stop and fill out an application for a voucher for them?
Right.
No, these kids are still going to be left behind.
They are. And low income families, students with disabilities, and those in rural areas are often left far, far behind. Instead of increasing opportunities for all students, school choice policies deepen existing educational divides. I mean, oftentimes, like we're saying, rural communities often don't even have these private institutions they can send them to. So there's no options for them.
Right. I mean, we're in a city. There's a bazillion options for schools and charter schools and private schools and all these homeschooling university model schools. Like there's a zillion choices. But in rural Texas, a town might not even have a private school option.
Right.
Public schools are the backbone of these communities. They serve as employers, cultural hubs. When funding is removed from school choice programs, these schools face closure or consolidation, which can devastate a small town. And it can really force students to scramble for transportation or travel long distances for education.
Right. In rural Texas, public schools not only provide education, but they also provide extracurricular activities and essential services. When state funds are siphoned away to support private education options that are often unavailable in rural areas, local public schools face severe financial strain and potential job loss, in addition to the issues that the students are going to face.
I mean, we have students who get all of their meals, all their daily meals in school.
Yeah.
Like, ugh. Despite lofty promises, school choice programs in other states have not consistently led to better educational outcomes. We already have statistics on this. Studies of voucher programs in states like Louisiana and Indiana have shown that students who transferred to private schools using public funds often performed worse on standardized tests compared to their peers who remain in public schools.
Yeah, if the goal is to improve education, policymakers should focus on strengthening public schools rather than diverting resources away from them. In Arizona, they started a voucher program in 2022 that created a massive budget shortfall. Now, they have to cut all kinds of programs to pay for it. It created, get this, a $1.4 billion deficit. Insane.
Outrageous. That's completely outrageous.
It's proven to not work.
So instead of investing in a school choice system that primarily benefits private institutions and elite families, Texas lawmakers should prioritize policies that improve public education for all students, increase funding for public schools, pay teachers higher salaries. How about smaller class sizes? That would help.
Right.
And expand support services. Those things would yield far greater benefits than a voucher system that primarily weakens public institutions.
Right. And we would love to tell you that all of this organically happened, that this is a well-meaning bill that was created to solve a big problem with the education system. Well, no, that's not exactly how that happened.
It sure has not. While education should not even be a partisan issue, Republicans in Texas have taken several steps that undermine public education. Their policies and legislative actions have prioritized private school alternatives, reduced funding, and introduced ideological curriculum changes. This has all been part of a long game. It's all been created to erode people's belief in the public school system and put money in the pockets of corporate shills.
For sure. So there are several ways that have worked to weaken the state's public schools. First of all, Republican leaders, including Abbott, have pushed for school voucher programs, which divert the public funds to private and religious schools, some owned by people who directly fund his campaign efforts. Another conflict of interest right there, huh?
Oh my goodness. And when he was unable to get this bill passed over the last 2 years, like he's been at this for a while, he threatened and proceeded to primary out other Republican candidates who would not sign on to his voucher game. And, remember what we said about rural schools? Well, there are a lot of rural areas that had Republican candidates that did not oppose vouchers for those reasons. Like they knew that their kids didn't have other options. This should not be a partisan issue.
I mean, do they even have the money to do this? Right?
No.
They have proposed setting aside $1 billion over the next 2 years to create these accounts, which is a $500 million increase from what lawmakers proposed 2 years ago. So basically 100,000 kids could enroll in this. So there are 5.5 million kids currently in public school. So where is the money going to come from?
Well, right. And that's what people aren't even thinking about that. They think, oh, here's school choice. This is going to be great for all these kids. No, a handful of kids are going to qualify for this.
Yeah. all
And
this
it's going
money,
to
it
cost
should
a
be
ridiculous amount of money.
right. And if there is all this money, let's put it in the schools. Let's pay these teachers what they're worth.
Right. And people already complain about their property taxes. Where do they think this money is going to come from? So, and despite a 32.7 billion state budget surplus in 2023, a surplus, Republicans refused to increase the basic per student funding allotment, which hasn't been raised since 2019. They essentially held this money hostage.
And these kids, in the meantime, I have teacher friends that literally go to the store on the way to school to buy supplies for their kids.
Exactly.
Ridiculous. So Texas ranks among the lowest states in per student spending, forcing school districts to rely on the local property taxes. And that's going to deepen disparities between wealthy and low income areas. I mean, really, at the bottom, 10%.
Yeah. And we should point out that Texas does not have a state income tax. So all of this money is going to come out of property taxes.
It sure will.
It's the only way they can do it. Republicans have also restricted teachers' collective bargaining rights and refused to increase salaries despite teacher shortages. We have a massive teacher shortage in Texas. Like, teachers have just flown the system. I just got in an argument the other day with someone who insisted that all of this was the fault of powerful teachers' unions. So, not here. Like, Texas teachers and really any public employees in Texas cannot collectively bargain. It's against the law.
Right. Efforts have been made to defund teachers' unions, which advocate for better pay, better working conditions, and resources for those schools. New policies limit teacher autonomy, and that includes laws that threaten job security over discussions of race, gender, and history. I mean, that can be something as simple as providing a restroom to a person who identifies differently. It's just ridiculous.
Right. Texas has also led the nation in book bans. We're number one. Republican lawmakers push to remove any books that have issues of race, LGBTQ issues, progressive social topics. The state has also passed critical race theory bans, restricting how teachers discuss racism, history, and systemic inequality.
Yeah, and by the way, critical race theory, it's a complex legal and academic theory that analyzes systemic racism, and it's a topic studied at the college level, and it's not being taught in K through 12 schools. And proposed laws seek to limit sex education and discussions of gender identity, and it restricts students' access to inclusive learning materials. We're all different. We're a melting pot. Let's be that.
Yeah. Meanwhile, as they complain about schools indoctrinating students with these things that aren't actually happening, the Texas legislature has also proposed laws to put the 10 Commandments in classrooms, and the State Board of Education this year approved a Bible-infused curriculum for public schools.
I'm sure they approved the Quran too, right?
No.
No,
So
of course
weird.
not.
Who's indoctrinating whom again?
Right. And instead of fixing the teacher shortage crisis, the legislature has focused on cultural wars, ignoring calls for higher pay and better working conditions.
Right. Many public school buildings are in poor condition, but they've refused to approve funding for much needed repairs and upgrades. Texas has also cut special education funding, making it harder for students with disabilities to receive necessary support.
And let's talk just briefly about gerrymandering. Republican officials have redrawn school district maps to weaken political influence of communities that oppose their policies.
Oh my gosh, this has happened in my district.
It did. That was crazy when that
I
happened.
talk about it all the time because I am very much in the city. Like, we live in a city, and we got redrawn in the way that it's been redrawn. I always have to post the picture because it's so crazy. But we basically got redrawn into a rural district, and they don't even run a Democrat in there. They haven't. There's never been one in that area. And what they did was they ended up primarying the longtime Republican rep in that area who opposed vouchers because, again, rural schools. He knew his students did not have options. And so now we have no representation in my district at all. There's just like some crazy lady in there.
And all of these actions collectively weaken Texas public school system, driving teachers away. And the state has increasingly taken over local school districts, like with Houston ISD, replacing elected leaders with Republican appointed administrators. And this is reducing resources for students, and it promotes alternatives that would benefit private interests rather than the public good.
Yeah. So why should Texans and everybody oppose school choice bills? Well, This bill passed the Texas Senate this week, so it's now in the House. Like, we're in the final stages of this after he's tried to get this promoted for several years. And Texans should be deeply concerned about the potential consequences of this bill. While the rhetoric around parents' rights and educational freedom may sound appealing, the reality is that these programs threaten the foundation of public education. They increase inequality, and they fail to deliver any meaningful improvements in student achievement.
Instead of investing in school choice systems that benefits those private schools and rich families, Texas lawmakers should prioritize policies that improve public education for all students, regardless of their zip code or economic background. Increased funding for public schools, higher teacher salaries, smaller class sizes, and expanded support services would yield such far greater benefits than a voucher system ever would. If this passes, it's going to weaken public education for sure.
Exactly. These are scary times, but we're not powerless. Our democracy depends on us standing up for what is right. Public education is a pillar of democracy. When we defend it, we defend every child's right to learn, grow, and thrive.
Yeah, so to stop school vouchers in Texas, the most important thing you can do is to reach out to your state representative. Call, email, visit your Texas House representative, express your opposition to the voucher bill. We're going to be popping a couple links in our website and our show notes. A pro tip here is if you call, it's more effective than emails, so flood those phone lines. Personal visits to their local office are even more impactful. If you're listening right now, you can go to wrm.capital.texas.gov and find out who your representative is if you don't know who they are. Encourage public school parents, teachers, and community members to get involved, attend school board meetings, write letters, share personal stories, and spread the word online. If we stand up together, we can stop this attack on education and protect the future for all children, not just for the privileged few. Be sure to check us out on our website at btdthomeschool.com, as in been there, done that, btdthomeschool.com. You can join our mailing list and get news and updates on future podcasts, and be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, at the BTDT Been There, Done That Homeschool Podcast.